Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Zeman Outdoors, a channel where new hunters can learn and share ideas, tips, tricks, and lessons learned. Again, just an update or a reminder that I myself am a beginner when it comes to hunting and consider myself a novice, especially with archery equipment and things like that. But I wanted to go into a little bit of detail of the bow I bought, the upgrades I've made, some of the reasons behind why I ended up wanting to get into bow hunting, things like that. So to start, I kind of mentioned the philosophy and the reason why I wanted to start bow hunting in my last video. And that's kind of, my family purchased a property in Oklahoma, and their rifle season, which is what I've done mostly over the past 4 or 5 years, is only 3 weeks long. And with me living in Houston and making that drive, it's just not a lot of time to be able to go out and hunt. And also the fact that the places I've been able to hunt at in the past couple years are friends and other family members, and they don't want me shooting a buck and things like that. And so I've wanted to get into some public hunting and figured, being able to do archery hunting would have less people out in the woods on public land as well. And then again, the Oklahoma season for archery is from October all the way until mid-January. And I think you can harvest 4 more deer during archery season as well than rifle season. So that's kind of the reasoning a little bit behind why I want to get into bow hunting. Not to mention, I think I enjoy the challenge of it. You've got to be a lot more quiet. Your smell's an issue, things like that. So I guess to give you a quick rundown, so the bow I purchased, I purchased last year around Christmas time. They had a sale going on. I did quite a bit of research on beginner and entry-level bows, and this one was one of the top choices everywhere I looked and had just great reviews. And it's the Diamond Archery Infinite Edge Pro. I'll put a link to it below in the description. I think normally it's about $350, and I want to say I got it for about $300. And it's a very solid beginner bow, and I'll go into kind of some of the specs and details and what it comes with in a little bit here, and then as well as some of the upgrades that I've done. Alright, so here's a little bit about the bow that I purchased. Again, this is the Diamond Archery Infinite Edge Pro bow kit. So it comes with pretty much everything that you need to start shooting your bow. So I'll go through kind of the initial items, things that came with, and then some of the upgrades I've made, and then a couple of tips and tricks. So a little bit about the bow. This bow is a good beginner bow. It has a wide range of settings and adjustability, and I think that's why people call it a good starter bow, because anyone from kids to adults can use it. For the price point it's at, I think it's a good entry level to see if you like it, like bow hunting or archery in general. And so I've gotten a lot of good recommendations from this, and then a couple items that I'll go into a little bit later, the reasons why people don't think it's the best bow. So some good specs on this are the draw length can range from 13 to 31 inches. The IBO speed is 310 FPS, and the draw weight can go from 5 to 70 pounds. So I think those are kind of the critical specs, and you can see how wide of a range the draw length and draw weight are. So to go into kind of what comes in the kit, so this here is the stabilizer that it came with. It's pretty light, flimsy. It does the trick, but this is one of the items that they recommended upgrading, and so I actually ended up upgrading to the bee stinger here. It's a 6-inch bee stinger. And let me take this off for you. So it's a 6-inch bee stinger. It's got, you know, weights you can screw on and off here at the end. I just left all the weights on. I'll probably work on kind of adjusting and seeing what fits best with what I want to do. And so that was an upgrade I made. It came with the bow safety strap. It came with this rest. It's a whisker biscuit rest. Again, another upgrade that I made here was going into the QAD Ultrarest LD. That was the #1 item they recommended that I upgrade. They said, if you're going to upgrade any items on this, start with the rest, then the stabilizer, then the sight. So I've upgraded the rest and the stabilizer. Everything else is the way it comes. So to kind of show you, you know, it comes with a quiver here. You have a lever that you just pull up on, and it slides right off like that. You can take it off. You can see it's a pretty basic quiver. I mean, I don't think it's anything special, but from what I can see, I don't think you need to upgrade something that just holds your arrows. It's got a point. If you want to hang it, you can hang it from there. So then the sight is just a basic 3-pin sight for your 20, 30, and 40 yard marks. It has adjustability, vertical and horizontal, as well as adjustability with the pins. So then the rest that I bought was this QAD rest. You can kind of see, let's see if I can get a good angle here. So it's a drop away rest. The reason they recommended this was accuracy. They said with the drop away, you tend to get a lot more accuracy than a whisker biscuit, and so that was a recommendation from the archery shop and from actually multiple people. They helped me install the peep sight, the D loop. You know, one comment that I got quite a bit on this bow, why people don't like it, is if you look at the adjustment for the draw length here, you have 2 screws. One of the screws, though, falls under the limb. And so to change your draw length, if you want multiple people shooting the bow, you actually need a vise to be able to adjust that. And that's kind of one of the flaws that I've heard of this bow, is that it's not, for a beginner bow, it should be easily adjustable. And that's kind of one of the flaws that I've heard on it. So then let's back out here. So again, to adjust your draw weight, you've got an Allen wrench spot there, and then on the other side, same thing. And you'll want to adjust those equally. So as you make turns, you adjust the same amount on both sides. Another thing the shop did, and I recommend, this is why I also recommend bringing it to a shop, is they help you set up the timing, and they show you how that's done, so that, you know, basically these pieces here hit the string at the same time when you draw back. And they'll help you set up your draw length, what your arrow length should be. So that's a little bit about the bow. When I was at the shop the first time too, they also set me up with a release here. So this is I think it's the TruFire smoke release. And I can put a link for this release in the description. And I'll put a link for all the upgrades that I've made as well. So a benefit to this release is the adjustability. You know, you can turn it and make it longer. You can turn it left and make it shorter. You know, it moves around, and so it's got some adjustability. It's got quite a few marks and holes in here for just building around different size wrists. And for a beginner, I recommend a wrist release. There's a lot of different releases out there, and again, I don't have familiarity with all of them, but this is what I'm comfortable with, and it's probably a good release for somebody starting into archery because I think it gives you a little bit more comfort that you don't have to hold something, that it's on your wrist already. So yeah, that's a little bit about the bow and kind of my setup and what I plan to use for this hunting season. Okay, so one of the first things I did when I got this bow, I took it out of the box, and I wish I had started a channel sooner. I would have done a little unboxing and show you everything that it came with as well, and what had to be installed versus what it was already installed. But one of the things that I did is I brought it to my local archery shop, and I recommend finding and looking at reviews online of your local archery places. I think it's worthwhile to drive a certain distance if you found one that seems to be very reputable. The one I found actually ended up not being that far from my house. If you need a recommendation in Houston and North Houston, I definitely recommend them, and I can give you all that. But the reason I say that is, and some of the reviews I saw were there's a lot of beginner bow hunters, but archery shops obviously have a lot of knowledge, and sometimes with beginners, I feel like they don't really want to teach you or show you the ropes because it's just repetitive to them. It's something that's common knowledge to them. And so the one I went to was very helpful. They went through the process of showing me how to set the draw length, set the weight, the draw weight. They showed me how they put on the D-loop. They installed the sight and the rest and everything else, and kind of showed me the ropes and told me what things were named and gave me some maintenance tips, ideas like that. And so it was very helpful to have somebody kind of tell you those things because there's a lot of information out on the internet and it's not all true. And so one thing that I did also, even though like when I went and set this up, they sat there for 10-15 minutes with me and showed me how to shoot it, and they didn't give me a lesson, but they essentially were like, this is what you need to do, aim here, do this, hold it like this, and they gave you some tips and pointers, and it was a good start for me. But they also gave lessons, and so I went back about a month later after shooting some and not being happy with the results, and I asked them to give me a lesson. It was only $30 for an hour, which I find pretty cheap for something that's as valuable as that. And I recommend if you can get a lesson and you trust the instructor that you should do that. I only took one lesson. I think it's kind of all you need. They give you pointers, tips. They should show you, how to hold it, how to anchor. They gave me tips on how to practice and things like that. And they even recommended that I only needed one lesson. So they weren't trying to sell me on anything additional there. And again, if you don't want to do a lesson, you don't have the ability to get a lesson or the money to pay for a lesson, I recommend looking at the Nock on Archery series called School of Nock. I brought that up previously in my first video. It's a 12-week series that each week builds on each other. And I highly recommend that. I'm only about halfway through it, but I did notice some tremendous accuracy and other results from that series. And I'll put a link again in the description below. But again, on that series, I guess kind of a recommendation, because I've fallen into this trap a little bit. Don't sight in your bow every time you tweak something in your form or do anything like that. You end up wasting your time. I mean, each week I started to do it. I fixed something in my form and I thought I was getting better, so I was like, let's sight in my bow, re-sight it and get it, good at 20 yards. Well, then the next week I tweaked something else and I had to do it again. And so during that series, I think it's valuable and you don't waste a lot of time, but don't worry about where your arrow is going. I think the biggest thing is your consistent form. If you're aiming at the same point and your form's consistent, whether you're consistently high, left, right, low, it's not really a big deal. It's more that you're performing consistent, correct form. And then at the end of the series, you can sight it in at 20, 30, 40 yards and go from there. And I can do a video on sighting in a little bit later. It's not very difficult. It's pretty similar to how to sight in a rifle. So then another topic is building your arrows. So I made the mistake of getting way too into this way too quickly. I followed the Ranch Fairy on building arrows and arrow lethality, high FOC, heavy point weight arrows. And I do think that's a good follow and a good video series to watch. But I started building arrows probably the third or fourth week into shooting. I've probably only had 50 to 100 shots. And there's a lot of things that change. One thing that changes is in a new bow, your strings start to stretch and your timing can get off and things like that. And that definitely can affect your arrow flight. Another thing is I still don't consider myself having the best form. So with your form changing all the time, I think it's kind of a waste to buy arrows and build them and do all that. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed it and that's what I'm shooting now is those arrows. But I plan on doing the exact same process before hunting season once I have a more consistent, good form. And so that's just a recommendation that don't jump into it. I mean, I spent hundreds of dollars building these arrows and I'm going to end up rebuilding them, later this year. So I would just kind of, for practice purposes, just use some 400 spine, cheap arrows that are already fledged. You can get them from your archery store. And just use those to practice, and then you can get into building your arrow once you've got your form. Another tip, I tried to paper tune and go through the Ranch Fairy process again right away, and for the same reasons I just described, it's not worth wasting your time yet. Get your form down. I can't say that enough. That you waste your time trying to tune your bow and trying to get it perfect if you don't have good form, because every shot's going to be a different result, and it's nothing but frustrating. So trust me when I say this, perfect your form, make it consistent, and then jump into tuning your bow, building your arrows, things like that. So then my last thing I wanted to hit on is bow maintenance. Again, these are just some things that I've kind of picked up on videos and talking to the Archery Pro Shop and things like that. I recommend waxing your strings. They didn't get into detail of how long or how often you do it. I think the main thing is, if you shoot a lot, you just keep an eye on your strings, make sure there's no wear and frays or anything like that. But, kind of feel your strings and just feel if they're getting kind of dry, and if they are, you just take a stick of wax and put them on there, and you can get that from your local archery shop or on Amazon. And make sure you don't get wax on the serving up near the cams, that you stick to just putting it on the string. You don't want to get grime and oil and wax inside your cams. That could definitely cause issues. Again, and going into the cams, I recommend getting some sort of bow hook or something wherever you practice. I practice in my backyard, and I actually have a tree that's got a little limb that sticks out. I cut to a perfect length, and I just hang my bow on that so that when I go to pull my arrows, I'm not setting it on the ground. Because you don't want to get mud, dirt, grime into your cams. That can definitely cause some issues. So I would recommend getting a little bow hook, putting it in a tree or on your fence or wherever you shoot, so you can just hang your bow up while you go to pull your arrows. Again, before each time you shoot, I would take a look at your strings, make sure there's no wear on them, no frays, nothing like that. Take a look at your D-loop. You want to make sure there's not a bunch of wear on that, because when you pull back, I've seen plenty of videos, luckily I haven't had it, but when you pull back, you can just pop yourself right in the face. So also, in the Knock on Archery series, they talk about when you're pulling back to pull away from your face and then come up to your knocking point, your anchor point. And so that's kind of what I practice, just to make sure if it ever does happen, if something fails on the release or something fails on the D-loop, that I don't end up getting hurt from that. So those are kind of some of the basic tips that I have on maintenance. If there's anything else that you recommend or have tips or things that you've done or heard, feel free to leave a comment and I can touch on them in a later video, or we can discuss in the comment section. And then in some future videos I plan to go over how I've learned how to tune the bow, sight the bow, do some videos on arrow building, and some of the tools and things you need. I'd like to go over my public hunting setup with my saddle and how I'm going to set up in a tree with my camera and all that kind of stuff and all my equipment associated with that. If you have any suggestions on the videos you'd like to see, I'd love to hear about them. I can do some reviews on some of the things I've used. Obviously, again, I have pretty little experience, but I can give you my opinion on them, or I can point you in the direction of some good reviews on stuff. I plan on doing a couple unboxing and reviews on some trail cameras that I've used. So those are the plans for the future videos. But again, I appreciate y'all listening in, and if you enjoyed this video and want to hear more, please give me a like and subscribe to my channel, and look forward to having y'all watch in the future. Thanks.